Hi, I'm Fatu Ogwuche, the CEO and founder of Big Tech This Week, and it's great to be here, Ndile.
Really glad you could join. Welcome to the African Tech Roundup.
Thank you.
So, how do you decide to pivot your career into media ownership after having a fairly colorful career in policymaking, working in big tech, and presumably having a number of easier things you could be doing with your time and in order to make a livelihood?
You know what? All of the things that I have decided to do that have been outside like traditional corporate working spaces has always just been from curiosity. So I started Big Tech This Week as a hobby, right, while I still worked at Meta. And I think it was about my second or third year at Meta. It was also around just like when the pandemic had hit. And I was like just really, really like deep into work, right? Because everyone is working at home and you're literally documenting longer hours, you know? And I was working across like different continents. So I would find myself just like being up to like 11 p.m. still working. And then there was just a part of me that wanted to just creatively express myself in a different way. And I started thinking about the ways to do that, right? And one of the things that was happening around that time was Twitter had just gotten banned in Nigeria because the company had taken down a tweet that the president had posted from his accounts that violated their community standards. So it caused a lot of conversation around the time. And it was also around the time that Twitter had launched their newsletter platform called Review. And I just found myself just really talking about these things with friends, you know, whenever we get on calls because we weren't seeing each other, or just like thinking about it a lot. And I've never necessarily like been a writer, right? But I've always loved media. And I decided that, okay, maybe I should just like start writing about things. And it just seemed like a really good use of my creative time and creative expression. So that was how I got into like the tech part of it. It started as a hobby. It wasn't something that I took really seriously until people started taking it seriously, maybe like 2 years after.
People like me who subscribed and wish you did more writing, although you do plenty of other things we follow. So we will forgive you.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm going to be back. And you also kind of like pushed me to do that again after our collaboration on the piece that we collaborated on. And because I really enjoyed that process. And I'm like, okay, maybe I should step away from video a little bit, or at least like find a better way to balance my time. So I'm able.
In case someone listening missed it, the article is called If We Can Go Sweet, Fatu Ogwuche's reading of African Text 2024 Wednesday Signals. We're going to talk about that in a second. I am curious, though, about your experience in going from roles where you related to the media as stakeholders, as part of a broader ecosystem you were looking to engage, versus being the media. What have you noticed? What have you experienced? And how does it feel?
So one of the things that I did, and this is pre-Meta. So before I got into Meta, I was consulting on digital strategy for our electoral commission in Nigeria. And if you know anything about Nigerian elections, they are not boring. I prefer boring elections because it means that everything is going well. But Nigerian elections, it's almost like winner takes all. It's a do or die affair. So there's always something happening. And then, you know, it's the first time that the electoral commission was seriously using social media to monitor everything that was going on. And I was in charge of building that out, right? So like my job was daunting. And then in addition to that, I was also kind of like the face of the electoral commission. And mind you, I was maybe like 24, 25 at the time. So I would be on TV stations defending the electoral commission. They were literally just like pushing me to go answer the hard questions, which was crazy.
You were like that. What is it? That foot soldier that they send to go check for landmines.
Exactly. Like, because nobody else wants to do it, right? So if something goes wrong, it's like, oh yeah, we need to talk to you guys. They're like, oh yeah, Fatu, go do it.
Yeah.
But I think at that point, it just made me understand the relationship between being in a space where you are like you need to answer to people, and then the media is the way that distributes those answers, right? And the fact that like people want to know things, and you always have to be proactive about the way that you're disseminating that information. You never want to be reactive, so you need to give people what they want even before they ask for it, right? And then just doing that in like really creative ways. I think sometimes people get really tired about the ways that they consume information sometimes. If anybody does anything differently, they tend to gravitate towards that, right? So when I started thinking about becoming media myself and taking those experiences that I had learned from being somebody who had to represent an institution, to talk to people, and then use different ways of media to do that. And now I'm kind of like being in that and then reporting and like kind of being the person now that has to go to people to get this information so that I can now present it to an audience in ways that they like and they enjoy is still kind of like going back to that creative piece where, and this is just an example. I remember the next election cycle, I had left the Electoral Commission just after President Buhari became president, right? Because I'm like, okay, I want to go do other things. I'm interested in other things. And the
Go and
next
nurse
election,
those wounds.
Yes.
Go and heal.
Yes, exactly. so the next election cycle, because one of the things I did as well, and people don't necessarily do that anymore, is when I was running the social media accounts and doing all these other things and also being on TV, people didn't know that I was the person behind those accounts. So around when all of that was happening, people used to tweet things and say things like, oh yeah, they trust the Electoral Commission because of how they've been pushing out information and just like the creative ways they do it and, the ways that they engage in. The things I did during that election season, people still talk about it. Of course, one of the things I also made sure to build was institutional capacity, right? So because I had a team and, we did all that great work. But sometimes, the sauce changes a bit, no matter how much you kind of like put it into the food. So I remember the next election cycle because some of my friends knew that it was me doing that. And people tried very hard to find out like who was behind the accounts or everything. And then somebody had tweeted something and said, oh God, I really miss the person who was handling the accounts there because it's clear that something has changed. Where is that person? Where did you go? And my friend just like sent me a link to the tweet, and I was literally laughing because I think the thing that showed is just the creative way that you present information to people. Because nothing about the cadence or how the shared information changed. It was still anything that's happening with the Electoral Commission, any information that needs to go out was still being sent out. If people were having issues, they were still triaging or solving those issues. But I think it was that creative piece that was kind of like missing, that people missed a bit. So now trying to do that as media myself, I'm like, okay, I want to do the kinds of things or present information in a way that I would like to see it. Because tech is interesting, but sometimes it could be controversial. There could be just crazy things happening that maybe a startup or a founder doesn't really want to put out there, or maybe just in general as an ecosystem, we are quite protective of the ecosystem as well, where people think, well, we should not be putting out too much bad news anyway. So it's like, okay, this news still has to come out anyway, but what are the other ways that it can be presented where it doesn't just look like it's a really, really bad thing? So I think just being media now as myself is like, what are the really creative ways you can present information that's exciting to people, that people look forward to, they anticipate, and they're able to engage with?
I think creativity is a big part of it, but there's a strategic lens. There's an ability to sort of bring training, in your case, your legal background, your understanding of incentives across different stakeholders you're dealing with, an empathy for the person you are. In the case of the Electoral Commission, the people you literally represent and are trying to position for success at trying to make sure an election goes well, the people who are desperately wanting to ensure that their democratic rights are safeguarded and everything they need to know in order to make good decisions is being conveyed. And then there's the creative spark, the wit, your personal investment in a situation. It takes a lot of doing to distill that into compelling expression.
Yes.
In media.
Correct.
And I think that's kind of starting to needle at what I enjoy about the work you do. And, the thing you said about people being precious, you didn't use the word precious, I'm using it, but precious and sensitive about how, in the case of, Africa's tech ecosystem, how the desire is that we sort of project relentless optimism, relentless points of success. The irony of how that sort of comes to bite us when we aren't balanced in that. And the reality of the world being naturally and understandably suspicious and skeptical of no nuance when it comes to, like success and setbacks go together.
Yes.
And we all kind of know that. And we all kind of are suspicious when there seems to be a false narrative of like one or the other. being the only narrative, but it takes some emotional intelligence and finesse and understanding too to curate and bring people to the party willing to share meaningfully nuanced visibility to what's going on and what we can all learn from it.
One of the things that I tend to think about when, people have these conversations about, oh yeah, the media is mostly spotlighting the negative parts of the ecosystem versus the positive. First of all, I find those conversations so dull and so boring because for me, it just shows me that you're not like reading widely, or you've just like chosen one particular source of truth for how you get your information. And even that particular source of truth that you've chosen, you're probably just only focused on what kind of content that they put out, because a lot of the criticism that people have for like specific platforms is that, oh yeah, they like to show what's really happening, only the negative parts. But if you go on their platforms and look, they are also spotlighting really interesting things. They are amplifying the work that founders and startups are doing across the ecosystem. So if you're the person who's only just seeing news about, when this founder did X, Y, and Z, or this startup shutting down, then like that's on you, right? Or you could also choose, okay, maybe I'm also going to go over there and see what else is happening. But I think the thing I found really interesting and what I just enjoy seeing is just watching independent tech creators just do their thing and just, pick their own niches and just decide, okay, this is what I want to do. They want to tell stories their own way. They want to do partnerships and collaborations their own way. They want to spotlight things their own way. It's so exciting to me to see that. For example, whenever David Adeleke, who writes Communique, publishes anything, I'm reading it. Like, I'm focused on it.
I'm with you. Completely with you on that one,
whenever you do anything, like I'm very excited about it. Whenever Kilemaru, Kisitimi, whenever they publish things, I'm so excited about it, because one of the things people fail to realize is that the ecosystem is still quite young, right? If you're thinking about the startups that have existed, so maybe you think about like the InterSwitches in Nigeria, they're probably like 16 years old now, right? So they're way farther than maybe someone who is like 25, 26 can even kind of like catch up to even really know their story. But now when you think about the ones, and I'm giving this from like a Nigerian perspective, right? When you think about the ones that people are very familiar with right now, they use their products, they know about the founders, like they follow their lives. So we think about like the Flutter Waves, the Piggy Vests. Those are like 8, 9 years old. Yeah, Money Points, exactly, that just turned 10. And of course, like I covered them a lot last year as well. They became a unicorn last year. They just turned 10 years old. So these startups that the media, we have to cover, they're really new. And if you even think about how old these media platforms are, talk about that is the OG of this work. They turned 10 last year, right?
Yeah.
So
we turned 10 this year.
There you go. Yeah. I'm like, what, 2 years old? So like,
welcome. Welcome to the world.
Thank you. I'm still a baby in this, right?
No, but you've been in the trenches though. But I hear you. Yeah.
Yes. But when you think about that, you realize that we are like the media is growing at the same time as the ecosystem, and we're still really young. So it's okay for people to make mistakes. It's okay for startups to shut down. It's okay. And whenever I think about these things, when people are like, the startup ecosystem, are we going to survive? This is still a fairly young ecosystem, because if you compare it to ecosystems across like Europe, America, the ones that are super mature, all of the negative things that people tend to focus on right now have happened in all these places, and they were well documented. When they were documented, you didn't necessarily just have people always just say, why is this a story that always comes out in the press? It's like, go find the other positive stories, because they're right there as well.
You answered a few questions I had in my head about, why you would choose the independent media ownership, media publishing / you're effectively the lead journalist of your own publication.
Yes.
Why you choose that over any number of outlets, I imagine, would have been happy to have you, join in their ranks. I imagine after a stint at a place like Meta, and I've got other friends, we've got mutual friends actually who've been in that place, and I know how much of a sort of pressure cooker environment it is. I don't know too many people rushing back to something similar without pause.
Yes.
All that to say, my assumption is that you're valuing of the singular opportunity this current environment gives an individual to publish themselves and also to create platform and to create not just one-way expression or broadcasting, but a dialogue and a platform to not just debate, but communicate, converse to common understanding. Does that resonate, or, whatever I left out? Maybe what did I get wrong?
First of all, it's a very personal thing. So I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. So before I joined Meta, I had my own company. So after I left the Electoral Commission, I decided I was going to just spend 3 years at the Electoral Commission. I did that. And when I left, because they had offered for me to stay on, work with the new chairman of the commission and just still do what I was doing and even have more freedom and, more resources to do it with. And I didn't know what I was going to do after that. But I just said, no, I want to do a year without doing any kind of work. And then I ended up going to Obama's Young African Leaders Fellowship. I did that for like 2-3 months. So that time was the perfect time for me to just kind of like sit down and decide what I wanted to do afterwards, right? At the end of the fellowship. So after the fellowship, I decided, okay, all of the gaps that I saw just in terms of the internal processes, communications and media at the Electoral Commission, let me build a company that addresses that, and then work with electoral commissions around Africa, actually. So then I built a company called the Election Network, and I started working with electoral commissions. I was traveling around a lot. And then it was also around the same time that Cambridge Analytica happened. So, of course, Facebook, as it was called at the time, they were at the center of that, right? And one of the things that they started really working on was getting their election strategy right. And of course, extending that to Africa as well. So now they're now looking for, okay, who are the people that we can work with to help us figure that out? And because I'd done some work with them, I'd built partnerships with them while I was at the Electoral Commission. They helped us a lot with our civic engagement strategy because Facebook was the platform Nigerians were using to communicate, so was Twitter. So I built relationships with these two companies. So now when the opportunity came for them to, just like really dip in the electoral strategy on the continent, the Africa team that I'd worked with immediately just asked me to do it. And then I just created a company that was doing that work anyway. So now they became a client at the time, right? So they were a client for like almost a year before I joined them full time, because they had asked me maybe like 6 months in to do it full time. And I was like, I just created this company, it's still new. I don't really want to join full time. But the work started becoming so extensive in a way where the internal documents that I would have needed to see, I couldn't do as a consultant. So I had to be like full time and internal to do that anyway. So after a while, I spoke to my team and I was just like, okay, it made sense to do so. But while I was at Meta, those 4 years, and I think that was also what kind of like pulled me into now starting Big Tech This Week on the side as a hobby, was that, that entrepreneurial spirit didn't die. It was just there in my chest, just clawing at me. Anytime I have any quiet moments, it's just there like, girl, you have to do something. You have a lot of creativity inside you that you need to express one way. And, the work you're doing is just not enough. It's not filling that gap. So I think for me, I kind of just went back to being entrepreneurial again. And then now the thing I was interested and curious about was tech in Africa, right? So when I decided to do it, I'm like, okay, yes. So of course, let me build a company to do that. Because my Big Tech This Week started as a newsletter, but then it just started like growing legs, and I'm getting all this interest from people to like wanting to collaborate and like sponsor some of the work that we're doing. And I'm like, okay, I actually now need to create a structure around it. And around the time that I started as well, and you're right in terms of like saying, like taking my skills and my creativity and doing it with already established publications or companies. At least like 3 major ones reached out to poach me to just come
We
do
weren't
what I
one
was
of them,
doing.
by the way. Just for the record, people, we weren't trying to take you off the
Sorry.
scene. We love what you're doing, and no hate to those who tried to copy you. Obviously, they were savvy too. So yeah,
Yeah. So they these companies, they tried to poach me, which I found really flattering as well. But I decided, what, let me just focus on building my own thing and seeing where it goes. Because I know if I go join any company, 2-3 years later, this thing is in my chest again, and I have to like step out and do it. So the way I also think about this as well is just kind of like looking at where we currently are and what the future is. I think that we're going to keep seeing more independent people now. Of course, we're being called creators, doing their own things across different industries.
So do you think of yourself more as a creator than a journalist, or both?
I think myself as a creator,
Okay.
right? And it's funny because there was a time I think I was going to be hosting something, and when they put the flyer out, they hadn't sent it to me yet. And then the bio was like, tech journalist. And one of my friends who was like a renowned journalist, I took a screenshot and I sent it to her, and I was like, "Girl, why are they calling me a journalist? I didn't go to school for this." Like, and she told me, "You are a journalist. That these days these definitions change.
I'm with her.
Yeah, you don't need to go to school and get an MBA or go to Columbia Journalism School to be a journalist now. That I tell the news and I have integrity around how I tell the news. So that makes me a journalist. So I should just lean into that definition of that. So yes, like I do take it. If people describe me as that, I take it because the first time I saw it, I felt like, an imposter, not imposter syndrome, but I'm just like an imposter. So I don't think I am a journalist because I didn't go to school for this. But she's like, the definition has changed. And I'm like, okay, if you as the journalist is telling me this, then okay, your word is law. So yes, I will see myself as
I
a
can
creator.
totally relate because the first time I was called a journalist was a very, I'm not going to embarrass them by saying who it was because they probably didn't realize I wasn't professionally identifying as one. So what they didn't realize is they made it possible for me to think of myself as a journalist without, without feeling as much of an imposter. But it was a massive international outlet that I was writing for at the time.
Yeah.
And I've only just recently come back to identifying primarily as that professionally in the last year or so, in a way that I certainly wouldn't have felt comfortable doing while I was still in VC, for instance. But to your friend's point, and bless her, I think she's right. I think it's possible to be a non-journalist practicing journalism, which I have been for a very long time. But in this current iteration of me being a media owner as yourself, and leading editorial efforts for African Tech Roundup, I primarily identify as a journalist now and own that and own the mores of what that means. But apart from you not wanting to misrepresent being part of a profession that you weren't trained for, being a creator to you means what? You're just out here making great media?
Yes, is what it is. And also doing that from like my own lens as well, right? And I'm building it around my personality because a lot of the things that I put out, they are just like a direct reflection of me. If I am doing activations, it's because it's what I want to do. If anybody was doing something similar, I'm like, okay, how would I want to see this done? So sometimes I have like new and fresh ideas about things, but sometimes I see something and I'm like, okay, I want to put my own spin on this and then do it like my own way. So I'm very comfortable with using my personality to drive the creative side of my work. And for some people, like you're not,
you're not meant to bring yourself to the work. You're supposed to be arm's length, agnostic, apparently unfeeling.
Exactly.
And
you're not supposed to do that. Yeah. You're not bringing your whole self to work. You're just, you leave it outside, you come, you do the work, and then you go back, right? But I'm the center of my work. It's my ideas, it's my team's ideas, it's me really pushing things. It's me putting my face in front of a lot of things, sometimes which is not very easy to be, so visible. But I find that, I'm really comfortable doing it. And there are pieces of the work that I do that I never had training for. I never took even one lesson for. Of course, now I'm trying to make sure that I am getting those skills that have been like taught and that by people that have built curriculums. But just independently, a lot of the things that I do are things that I've never done before or necessarily had any reference for. But just because I was curious about it, I did it. Like I have not hosted things before. Like being on stage, I love being on stage. Maybe I might have 2 or 3 seconds of just, some nerves, but it's normal. I'm about to go do something in front of lots of people.
Yeah.
But the moment I get on stage, I'm very comfortable. I am very comfortable in front of a camera.
Like a moonshot. Shout out to the Tech Cabal. That's a massive stage, and you hold down really well.
Thank you so much. Like the moment camera turns on, I am super comfortable in front of it. I don't know, why that is, but I don't question it. I'm like, if I'm comfortable in front of it, then it's what I should be doing. So a lot of my work is, yes, it is personality driven, and of course, that's a core part of what creators do, right? It's personality driven. People have to also relate to you, be curious about you, to also engage with your work. Some people would like you, and it also just exposes you to criticisms as well. People might not like what you do. There's times that I do stuff and, people are like looking at me sideways or, saying some really harsh things. But that's also like the price you pay for putting yourself out there and like trying to do work. But the way I see what's happening right now, what I see that will happen in the future is we're going to see more independent creators across different industries who their business model is literally just around collaborating with people, having partnerships with other creators doing the same thing, and then telling stories from their own lens, but of course with integrity, right? And of course with creativity being at the center of it. Because I think one of the reasons why people even pay attention to what it is that you're doing is because you're doing something interesting. What I'm noticing more of now is people who are just kind of like deciding, okay, I don't necessarily want to do something corporate anymore. I have a lot of strong belief in what it is that I'm trying to do and the stories that I'm trying to tell. And then I'm going to go out into the world and do that. And then meet people who are doing similar things. Somebody who does something similar to me in Kenya can decide, oh, I'm coming to London. Or if Fatu does this in London, I'm going to go there and collaborate with her on something. I could go to South Africa and I'm looking for people who are doing similar things. And then I go and collaborate with them like on a project or we shoot some, so I'm seeing that happen even across projects as well. So even for the crossover show that I wrote about in the article for Africa Tech Roundup, right, where I went to Lagos, I have a team here that does my production. But of course, I'm not going to fly them to Lagos. Like, even if I had a lot of money to do that, I wouldn't do that. But I'm like, I want to go to Lagos and work with a new production team there, right? And just like collaborate with them on that, because like that's also part of the process. If I'm going to South Africa, I want to be able to do that. So you have like these groups of people that are on the technical like production side, and then you have the storytellers. And in the context of just like the media ecosystem, that's what I see is going to be happening across the world, where people are just collaborating, doing really interesting things, being also personality-led, creativity-led. And that's how we advance like different parts of the industry, right? I mean, we saw it happen with, of course, like the US elections. It was fraught and it was like very controversial. But my biggest takeaway from that was that traditional media was on life support.
They're trying to own they're trying to own headlines, trying to
yes,
grab a scoop.
yeah.
It's like, fam.
Yeah, they were on life support. I think the great part of that is that you also have the freedom to do it, but you also need to have integrity with that freedom. So I think the constraints of being in the media institution, especially the ones that have existed for a very long time, is that, and sometimes this is what people who have left newsrooms and media agencies, one of the things they complain about is you can have a fantastic idea about how to do a certain thing or present a story a certain way, and you get shut down. But if you were doing this by yourself, you could easily do that. You could go ask a question to a CEO or a president of a country that somebody who was attached to a media publication can't do, because they don't have that freedom. But I think that freedom creates a lot of opportunities, but people still need to have a lot of integrity with how they handle it, so that you don't take it for granted.
It needs to be stewarded well.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an excellent segue to us talking about our collaboration, because I described you in the first line of our op-ed collaboration, which is typically me introducing a new voice or personality to my audience, our audience at African Tech Roundup, and the syndicated audience of like upwards of 4 million people through syndication. Shout out to Business Report in South Africa who partner with us on that, as well as everyone who subscribes to our newsletter. And so in that first line, I mentioned that you're regarded by many as low-key the industry's head of intelligence. I love that. We've unpacked why I might say that, accounting for your very colorful, eclectic history. I say that just to say, to the point you made about you being in a position to ask questions that, someone maybe at a legacy institution might not ask.
Yeah.
You come to things like the crossover show, which everyone should check out if they haven't on YouTube.
Yes, please.
And it'll be linked in the show notes as well. You come to those things with a knowingness, a sense of informed intelligence.
Yes.
Right? That kind of speaks to you being this unofficial industry head of intelligence in the scene. But then you also come with a natural curiosity, almost like this disarming sense of, come now, give us the juice. You know what I mean? So why am I sharing all of this? Because I'm not a fan of listicles. I'm not a fan of, and we've discussed this offline. I'm not a fan of like the awards, like who wins what and who's the biggest this and that. There's something that instantly when I see those things, no shade to the Forbes, but 30 under 30, like I can't, like I genuinely can't stand that stuff, trying to distill our year into like the top this and who needs to walk away with like the garland and stuff. But when you do it, it makes sense somehow. Do you know what I'm saying? So talk us through, because and I mentioned the crossover show because effectively that's what inspired the collaboration.
Yes.
So you then reflected in writing about the year that was in terms of noteworthy signals and trends.
Yes.
In 2024, and what you and your guests were kind of looking ahead to seeing how those might impact the year ahead.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in your article, you're talking about, you're basically making predictions of your own, again, leveraging this intelligence, but also the show and things that came out of it. So yeah, the question really, it boils down to a question, I hope, at some point, which is like your curation process. Yeah, like let us into that a bit.
It also goes back to what I said about, how a lot of the things that I do is really about my personality and being like personality led and, just finding like really nice creative ways to do things. And I'm also one of those people that people feel very comfortable speaking to. People have told me like deepest, darkest secrets or just like our first meeting, right? So I think
you have the gift.
Yeah. So, and I always receive that. And I think one of the things that's also really important to me is that I love people. I love talking to people. I'm very private about my own life, but I'm very open to people talking to me about theirs. And I think one of the other things in the ecosystem as well is where 3 or 5 people are gathered talking about the tech ecosystem, people get very comfortable and just start saying things. And these are things that other people should know just to give them a sense of what's really happening. But of course, sometimes, you don't want to do that in front of a camera. But sometimes, people get comfortable to the point where they're okay to do that. They're okay to really speak about like what's on their mind and talk about, what's really going on without fear. They're just comfortable doing that. And of course, they're not doing that out of malice. They're just doing that to provide like more education into what's happening. I remember the first, when I released Backstories, which is like my show where I interview tech entrepreneurs, released that in like 2023. I didn't shoot anything last year, but this year we're going to be shooting more with, the tech entrepreneurs that don't necessarily do lots of interviews, but people really want to hear from. And I remember the first one that I shot was with Kola Aina, who is the founder and managing director of Ventures Platform.
Prolific VC.
Yeah, they're the OGs.
In the Nigerian scene.
Yeah, they're the OGs of like venture capital in Nigeria and across Africa as well, right? They do a lot of great work.
The headline win to date would have been betting on Paystack,
yeah? Yes. So, they were early investors in that. They raised a significant amount of money.
Among others.
Yeah, to also support startups across Africa as well. So they've done a lot of great work. And Kola does not do a lot of interviews. No, he doesn't. Or at least if he's doing something, it's written and he's just like dropping quotes. But you don't really see him in front of a camera. And Kola and I had followed ourselves on Twitter. Like that was the extent of our knowledge of each other. And it wasn't like we interacted at all. So when I wanted to do the interview, I was like, I really want to talk to Kola because I know when I used to live in Abuja, they had one of like the first hubs. I used to go there to just go work out of it. And they were doing something really interesting then. So to see where he had gotten to from just that period in time when I wasn't even interested in tech. I thought it was really interesting. So I wanted to talk to him. And I asked a mutual friend of ours to connect us, right? The first time I was meeting Kola was on the day of our interview. So
no ways. You guys, it felt like you guys had known each other for...
Exactly. Exactly. So that was the feedback that I kept on getting. And anytime I tell people, we literally met 30 minutes before we started rolling, they're like, no.
Wow.
But also... I do a ton of research. Like, research is my sweet spot. Research is the point where, like, I shut off the world and I'm just like in this nice buzzing space where I'm just like really digging into what it is that I want to communicate. So I did a lot of research, and then whenever I do research, I feel really prepared and I'm able to like have conversations with people. So I think one of the things that like drives what people end up seeing and what makes for really great conversation, because the thing I've also found out is that people appreciate that. Like people appreciate when you're not asking them, like your run-of-the-mill questions, the questions that they keep hearing all the time. They appreciate it when you're coming from like a different angle that's informed by knowledge, that's informed by you spending hours and hours on the internet, going through their socials, talking to their friends, talking to people they've worked with, people that, that know them, that are giving you like all these anecdotes.
So you mean like journalism, Fatu?
Exactly.
Basically, people appreciate good journalism.
Yes. But guess what? We don't really see that anymore, right? People are just like, oh yeah, they just like get some random vague questions.
ChatGPT generate some questions. I'm about to interview this person.
I didn't want to say ChatGPT, but now that you've it.
Nah, that's what the people are doing. We see you out here. We see you out here not engaging fully and deeply and leaving it up to what's already out there to inform what's next.
So it's that, it's my preparation, it's my curiosity, it's my charm, it's the fact that people are very comfortable with me, and it's the fact that I also love to do this. So if you're with people that really love to do what it is that they do, you're going to kind of like be immersed in that in some way and want to contribute to that as well. So yeah, that's really what it is. So it's also informed how we prepped for the crossover show, how I kind of like selected the people that I wanted to be on it, and Sheye and Tosin. That was the first time I was meeting Tosin in person, but I've connected with her before. I've interviewed her before. Sheye, I met him maybe like a month before. We had like a closing mix-up for Moonshot by Tekabal. And I just saw him sitting there. And one of the other things I'm really good at is just like walking up to people and introducing myself. And I saw him sitting there.
And that's Sheye Taylor, of course, of Paid HR.
Yes. Yeah, the CEO and founder. I'm co-founder. Yeah, and I just went to go say hi to him, introduce myself. And he knew me already. So it was just like nice to like just connect in that moment. So now it was easy for me to now, a month or two later, send him a DM on Twitter and say, hi, I'm doing this. Would you be interested in coming on? It's also about like just building relationships, making people really comfortable with you. And of course, Osariman. I've known Osariman for a while.
Shout out to the subtext and...
Yes, who is the founder.
Your former Meta colleague.
Yeah, and he's also like a creator in his own right. He produces music, he's a producer. He's just like a really talented person.
Grammy Award. Is it Grammy or Academy Award winning? Can't remember.
Nominated. Grammy nominated. Yeah.
Oh, they didn't win.
Yes.
Forget them. They don't know what they're doing. Yeah. No, but for real. No, he's for real like an author.
He's an amazing person. I really love his writing. People should definitely check out the subtext. He's going to be doing more of that now, which he said as well. He writes about the ecosystem and just like really deep, thoughtful analysis, smart analysis of what's going on. So I really enjoy his writing.
Honestly, people should look out for what's coming from him soon. I'm excited.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. 100%.
So you're giving us a sense of how you curate. There were 3 people you had on this year's crossover show. Tosin would have been the third.
Yeah, Money Africa. She's the CEO and founder of Money Africa. Very smart, warm babe. Like, she's like so positive, and she's also one of those people who she just breathes life into people. Like, she's one of the people who like you meet her and you guys are just having a conversation, and then she can just stop mid-sentence and just tell you, like, I love how you think about this thing you're thinking about. I love how you're saying this. I love, like, she's that person who, if she notices something really good, she's quick to say it.
An encourager.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So she's just like a nice ball of lights who just spreads positivity where she goes, and she does really great work, promoting financial literacy as well. So yeah, she's an amazing person.
So all that to say, if you came to this conversation thinking we were going to share any spoilers about what was actually unpacked on this year's crossover show, well, you're sorely mistaken. Also, if you thought we were going to do an audio version of the article collaboration that Fatu and I worked on together, well, again, I'm here to disappoint, because both of them are going to be in the show notes. Definitely do check it out. African Tech Roundup, wherever the internet is served.
Yes.
And you can definitely search for the op-ed, If We Can Go Sweet. Fatu Ogwuche's reading of African Text 2024 Wednesday Signals. In fact, even if you just at this point Google Fatu Ogwuche African Tech Roundup, you should find it quite easily. And then, of course, the crossover show by Big Tech this week on the world's biggest TV station, that is YouTube. The crossover show 2024, you can pretty much, again, run a search anywhere. The internet is available and find that pretty easily. And you're welcome. Okay, you're welcome. Because it's all great. And with that, honestly, Fatu, I just want to thank you for being on the podcast and just for being all round a wholesome innovation architect.
Thank you.
Creative vibe and low key. The industry's head of intelligence. Long may you have good health, and may our paths continue to cross as we collaborate in these streets.
Yes, and Dile, before we wrap up, I know I told you this before. I think the first time we connected, we had a video call. But when I was thinking of doing this or even about to start writing my newsletter, I mentioned to you that, and I don't know if you remember this because we had lots of conversations since then.
I do. I'm about to get embarrassed. Okay, but yes. Go ahead.
When I was doing research about, the publications that I really love, that I already interacted and engaged with, and wanted to kind of like model mine over, just like trying to understand how people are writing out here, the kind of tone, the kinds of things that they cover. Africa Tech Roundup was like one of the first places I went to. In fact, like one, two, right? And of course, I had known of you. So I was like deeply, deeply immersed in your work as well. So that guided everything I did, from writing the newsletter, and also kind of like expanded everything else. Because I was even thinking once, I was like, okay, if I was going to do a podcast, can I even compete with Africa Tech Roundup? They've been doing this work for like a really long time. But
wow.
Yeah, but you were like a source for me. Africa Tech Roundup was a source for me. And I just want to acknowledge and appreciate all of the fantastic and great work that you've done in just uplifting and elevating the ecosystem and all the stories and the people that are contributing to just really driving all the great work that's happening. So thank you so much. And thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And I receive that. And I'm so glad. The robbery would be you doing anything other than showing up as you. And I'm really grateful that you're doing that. And I'm sure I'm not alone. And yeah, honestly, the pleasure and the honor is mine. The village thanks you.
Thank you.
And we will be seeing you in these streets, right? Because you'll probably be in the penthouse suite. I'll have a media pass. Just stick your foot out, keep the door open for me to slide in. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And then we'll call it even.
Exactly.
I'll do the same.
Please,
if
yes.
they ever doubt your journalism credentials in the media box. I'll be like,
Help
hey,
me.
fam, hey, don't be talking sideways about this one. She's with us, So if we can do that, then we'll stay
Thank
good.
you so much. And the village thanks you too.